Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, Jarred Vanderbilt is back. Anthony Davis wants another center. And does that all make Rui Hachimura expendable? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one is always free, never behind paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube, Andy, as you well know, is where over 27,000 subscribers are all hanging out. And many of them, at least, have took that 12 and a half minutes that Jarred Vanderbilt played over the weekend, Saturday night against Golden State, and said, I have seen enough. Rui Hachimura, you are no longer needed around these parts. Go get another center, Rob Pelinka. So plenty to break down in this episode and through the week as we get very close to the trade deadline, with the Lakers playing some pretty good basketball all of a sudden. So do want to let people know first that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So like that game, Andy, on Saturday, a very solid win for the Lakers, 118-108 over Golden State. It was soon after Anthony Davis made his comments about wanting a center to ESPN and Shams Charania. It was a night where Rui Hachimura missed the game with a calf injury, and it was also the return of Jarred Vanderbilt to the lineup. And you put all of those things together, and it is aggressively furthering the conversation about where the Lakers are and what should happen before the trade deadline.
We can get into what should or should not, or frankly, what even can happen at the deadline. But I do think it's worth drilling down a bit more on Vando, the
Sure.
return, because he has missed the better part of 2 seasons, and we've spoken a lot about how not just how much Vando can help, but just how, in a lot of ways, he is the guy that can provide particular types of help that few other players on this roster can, and I'd argue nobody other than Anthony Davis, who's just in his own category, can really do in the all-in-one person like Jarred Vanderbilt. Like he has very specific skills combined together in one player that is very difficult for the Lakers to replicate, again, just with one guy. I want to give a rundown of just some of the stuff.
It's so funny. You describe like a specific set of skills like that. He sounds like Liam Neeson. For the Lakers, he kind of is.
He is kind of like Liam Neeson in
very specific set of skills.
Right. And the Lakers have been missing them for a while. He played about 12 minutes in that game against the Warriors. And in the first half, you saw just in like 6 minutes, Vando getting a difficult defensive rebound in traffic. You saw him get a putback basket on an Anthony Davis miss. There was a steal against Moses Moody. And as the Lakers were running, he set a really good screen that cleared a path for Dalton Connect to get to the bucket and transition. Then in the second half, there was a really nice pass off the dribble, like near the free throw line across
a little short
lane.
On the pick and roll, short roll.
Right, to set up DFS in the corner for a three. He had a box out against Brandon Pajemski, which allowed Anthony Davis to get a rebound. That was a possession that turned into an AD runner. And there was a possession that led to a 24-second violation. And Vando was in the middle of it defensively. That ended up resulting in Gabe Vincent scoring on the other end. So that's a lot of different stuff packed into 12 minutes. And I think it just speaks to the way that Vando can help kind of shore up the margins. You know, we've heard a lot of margins talk lately with the Lakers. I think he's a guy that shores up a lot of margins, even if he isn't, other than maybe through defensive versatility. He's not an A-list talent at anything, but he's like B+, A- in a few different things.
Whenever you get a player like that back, especially one that isn't replicating what you have, but filling holes that you don't, it takes guys And Jarred Vanderbilt didn't guard. He only played 12 minutes. It's not like he didn't shut down Steph Curry. Like it wasn't Jarred Vanderbilt who kept Steph Curry from scoring in the second half. I'd have to even go back and look how much the overlap even in court time. But when you have guys like him available and you can change your combinations, you can play him with DFS, you can play him with Max Christie, he can help LeBron, he can help Anthony Davis. However you want to set these things up, it makes it easier for whoever's primary job it is to address Curry or the couple guys who you want to try to make sure get those switches or whatever it might be. It makes it easier for them to execute their jobs because you have a better defender. You have another guy who's active and capable, got the athleticism to move around a little bit, does the little stuff like boxing out, making the right, screening better and, running through whatever it is. Guys who do those sort of little things are really valuable. And especially again, in a way that's sort of non-duplicative. And so you get a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith and you bring him in and he does a lot of that. So there's a reason coaches love Dorian Finney-Smith. And it's not because he's going to give you 18 points a game. You can find, I would say you can find 15 to 18 points a game anywhere in the NBA because the Lakers have been struggling to find some of that periodically. But I think people understand what I mean. Scoring is often the easiest skill to find. And it's the other stuff that can be harder. And so, as we see Vanderbilt bump up from 12 to 15 to 18 to probably somewhere around 20-ish, something like minutes a night, I think at the very least, you'll sort of see the value and see the utility of him. And then you can decide what does that mean for the rest of the lineup? Well, obviously he's going to eat into everyone's minutes a little bit, ideally LeBron and AD, but yes, no question, he's going to have an impact on what you feel you need, or if you need Rui Hachimura.
That's a really big piece of it, though, that I when you and I have talked before about where the minutes for Vando come, we had talked about Connect as a very likely candidate, except we'll get into it maybe later in the show. Dalton Connect all of a sudden is looking much more like the guy that for, I don't know, maybe a month felt impossible to take out of the rotation, where, there was a point where it seemed like he might not ever leave the starting lineup. He's had a few games now where he's looked more like that guy, but Dalton had seemed like a likely candidate because if he wasn't scoring, you don't see a lot of tangible utility for him on the floor, and Vando can be used defensively like a guard. So that's where you plug him in. And then offensively, it's more just what are you asking him to do on specific possessions as opposed to his skill set. We had talked about, potentially Jackson Hayes losing some minutes, especially depending on what the matchup is. Rui has come up as a possibility, but then the idea that maybe he could just shave a few minutes off LeBron, shave a few minutes off AD, which is something ideal in any scenario. You want those guys being able to steal a few minutes off the court each if possible. Vando might just be the solution for those guys.
I don't want to put so much on the return of Jarred Vanderbilt that it gets cartoonish, the jokes that have been going around. Season doesn't start until Trevor Ariza is back. Season doesn't start until Kendrick Nunn is back. The Lakers have had these sorts of things. Vando is obviously a different deal. And look, they could come out tonight and not look great. Maybe Vanderbilt doesn't play as well, and maybe the impact is bad. Maybe they get blown out by 15. I don't know, but I hope not. But I don't know. It's not. It's the point is you can see what it looks like if he's in there, and then so what do you do next?
They get blown out by 15 by the Hornets. I mean, frankly, I'm just saying everything we're talking about right now goes to bleep if they lose by 15.
Or if they just a minute, if they lose, you got to win these games. That the Lakers are suddenly.
We might not feel good about this if they don't win by 15. Forget blown out.
Anything on the road, just go win the game. But the Lakers have suddenly gotten that vibes thing back because the swings in this season, as we talked about, there's like no middle ground. It's all, wild swings on the competence curve. We're back in a high area, and let's see what it looks like as they move through this road trip. But again, closer to the deadline, why is it that Rui Hachimura is suddenly the guy that a lot of Lakers fans are like, see you later? Like, oh, look, showed you weren't needed. I don't know if they're entirely correct, but there's a big reason he is the next D'Lo, so to speak. We'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is really easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet, just $5, and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5 and Abe Lincoln, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
I saw some people online after the game, Andy, on Saturday, noting that like, looks like Rui picked the wrong time to miss a game. Like, sometimes you never want to let the organization know you're expendable, things like that, all that kind of. Nothing about what happened on Saturday in terms of Hachimura's presence or non-presence, in my opinion, changed the way the Lakers would approach trading him. Lakers know exactly what they have in Rui Hachimura. And to me, the biggest reason that he is next man up is that he's even, I think, he's played reasonably well this year. There are gigantic holes in his game, and everybody knows where they are. Don't really expect them to get better. And more importantly, he's the next biggest salary that they have available to trade. So you put all those things together, and if you want to make a deal for anybody who makes any money, you got to trade Rui Hachimura. Like, that's part of it. So, I mean, some of this is just math.
There's also, too, the element of, what you have in Rui, and when Rui's playing well, and I think just as importantly, actually utilized well, I think he can be a really important part of this team. When Rui is not being used in a way that plays to his strengths, his weaknesses, of which there are some and they do exist, those end up becoming more pronounced. But I also think what Vando did on Saturday, as much as we both thought it was really useful and very promising, and I've been beating the drum about Vando's importance pretty insistently for like 2 years now. This performance, this return should not affect anything the Lakers do at the deadline, whether you're talking about Rui or anybody else, because there's going to be 5 games between now and the February 6th deadline. The Lakers play a game that day, but it's going to be after the deadline. It's not even like 2 full weeks with Vando not likely playing 100 total minutes by then. To put it in perspective, Armel Traore has played 61 minutes. Like,
Armel Traore's played 61 minutes?
Yes, he has.
I would have taken the under on that.
Hell, Bronny's played 29. So, like,
Bronny, by the way, lighting it up in the G League.
Yeah, but 100 minutes ain't a lot, if that. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if by the time the trade deadline rolls around, Vando's played 80 to 90. Forget 80 to 90 games of showing what you can do on the court. I'm talking 80 to 90 minutes of showing you can stay on the court. Like, banking on Vando moving forward in terms of your planning is somewhere between reckless, wishful thinking and stupid. Like, well, it's a bad idea.
To your point, I've seen people say, I think might have been Jovan who pointed this, like the Lakers I apologize for getting it wrong, but like the Lakers, Lonzo Ball is somebody who's always, attached to the Lakers in terms of potential trade targets. I don't even dislike the idea, depending on what the price is. But just in theory, the idea of taking Lonzo's skill set and dropping it on the Lakers, I don't have a problem with that in the slightest. But the Lakers, rightly, given their lack of trade capital, are very careful about trading for guys with lengthy injury histories, of which Lonzo obviously has one. And so the relying on Vando as is the equivalent of that. It's
Yes.
it is exactly the same thing as saying like we're going to put all our eggs in a Lonzo basket. It's like we're going to put all our eggs in a Vando basket. Like I agree with you. I still maintain the Lakers should treat him as if he is a bonus, not something you can count on throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, and look, if it turns out Vando stays healthy the rest of the season and he's reliable to stay on the court and you need to find the minutes for him and you've got a roster of other guys you need to play, well, that's why JJ Redick makes a handsome salary. Like there are worse problems in the world for a coach to have, particularly a first-time coach, than too many players you want to put on the court. Like,
right. And that's particularly relevant, Andy, in the context of Anthony Davis talking about wanting a center. Like if you add Nikola Vucevic or Kelly Olynyk, if you want to, real reserve, and Vucevic is a starting caliber guy in theory, or Valanciunas or Walker Kessler remains the probably not the right expression to use with him, the white whale.
Well, he is a great white whale, man. That dude's huge.
He's all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're gonna call somebody a great white whale, it does make sense for Walker Kessler because beyond the fact that he is in fact Caucasian, he is enormous.
And he's really pretty great at playing defense.
Yeah, I mean, he is basically a shot blocking whale.
Whale impressions.
Who hits the goal? Yeah, it was as if a whale was guesting.
Right. Where did Bryant go? And so you look at this and it's like that would make it harder because then you've got Anthony Davis at a 4, LeBron's at a 3. There's like if you bring in Walker Kessler, he's got to play 30 minutes, 25 to 35 minutes a night, depending on the matchup. Or why did you just release all the protections on the one pick, trade your other first 2 rounders that probably won't have a lot of protections on them. If you add Colin Sexton in a deal like that to make the money balance out and all that kind of stuff, now you're squeezing minutes the other direction as well. So it would be harder to get Vanderbilt on the floor, but again, good problem to have. And you do wonder if Vando starts to play a little bit more and he gets a little healthier and you look forward to the playoffs, as good as playoff Rui has been at times, part of the reason D'Angelo Russell was seen as very movable and needed to being moved was because he didn't hold up in playoff settings. Rui has had some very good experiences, but also some less good experiences in the postseason.
It would be very helpful if Rui is still on this team after the deadline if the Lakers don't play Denver. Like that's helpful in general, but
generally,
right. but particularly for Rui. Like,
but you know what?
It's become a brutal matchup for him.
It's terrible matchup, and it's a good point to make because how much of this is Rui and how much of this is that's just a god-awful matchup for him. And I think there's a bit of both. And the Lakers have to be careful about making I think generally speaking, you got to be really careful about making sweeping judgments about somebody's postseason abilities when they're role players, because that is so matchup dependent and role dependent and timing dependent.
Well, and along these lines, if you're going to ignore what we're saying and say that these type of past performances equal future letdowns, then let me explain why Rui might be somebody that you need to keep around. Talk about that coming up next.
Quick reminder about the Locked On Daily News, Locked On Lakers newsletter. You go to lockedondaily.com, click on Locked On Lakers, and you can have the show and a bunch of other NBA analysis delivered to you every day. Do want to mention as well that Sunday, as we record this, the 5th anniversary of the helicopter crash that killed Kobe and Gigi and seven other people in that helicopter. It is still a very strange thing, I think, for almost everybody who thinks about the Lakers, thinks about sports, whatever. It's still a very strange thing to think about, even with all the statues and memorials and murals and everything that's up around town.
It's interesting that you bring up both the statues and the murals, because Thursday, Matt Peralta was sitting in for me after the Celtics game because I was working the Lakers pre-halftime and post-game shows for 710 ESPN, the Lakers radio affiliate. And when I arrived at crypto.com, the arena, there was a line to take photos with Kobe's statue, the one that's in the plaza. And there is still, there was a line of at least 20 deep. And people have had plenty of opportunity to see the statue, get a photo with it, and that it still attracts a line that speaks to the power and the legacy, and just the way that Kobe is still part of the fabric of this city as anything else. Also, it's been now 5 years since a lot of these murals were put up. And I know that you and I both live in like the mid-city area of LA. There are at least 4 or 5 murals I can think of off the top of my head that got put up in that area. They're still there.
Oh yeah, and there are more if you go east. There are plenty more.
Sure.
If you go west, there are plenty more. They're all over.
Right, and it's been 5 years, and what's become really clear is those murals are never coming down.
No.
And to make it clear, I'm not saying they should. But what I am saying is murals often get put up and eventually painted over. These murals are not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I think so. There's two parts of this conversation, and I know we have another. We want to wrap up the point we're making about Rui as well, but there's the sort of still emotional shock and the effect that that Kobe had on people and his voice and his game and his plays and the players in the league and all of these things. And then there's the effect on the organization. And while I think the organization has handled, what has come since, I think pretty well in terms of in the immediate aftermath with how they got back on the floor and the statue spelling fiasco notwithstanding, it's a really nice, both of the statues that are out there are beautiful.
Yes.
And very well done. And, I think the work that, the way in which Kobe and Gigi's name has been used has generally been quite positive and all of these things. But it's also been a really difficult thing for the organization to, I don't want to say move on from, because it's not something you move on from, but like the Kobe sort of is still this presence. You used that word before, that hangs with the organization and is hard. I think it becomes hard for the organization in certain ways to move from things, to try different things, to approach things. So there's always this, I think, compulsion, rightly and understandably, to honor the spirit of Kobe and think about Kobe, and fans think about things in the context of Kobe. And sometimes I think that hurts the people who run the organization, because they too are extraordinarily emotionally linked to Kobe for reasons we all understand.
It's difficult in terms of, you'd mentioned before, moving on is the wrong phrase, but the idea of every organization in sports, when one of their greats retires, they need to form a new identity, because the identity obviously can't be centered around.
Yes, thank you. You were phrasing this much better than I was.
Right. A player, an organization cannot be centered around a player that no longer plays for them. And LeBron is on paper not just as good a candidate as you could find to fill in the footsteps directly after Kobe. You could argue he'd be the best one, because he's a massive superstar, and he arrived with the Lakers as a made man already.
Yeah.
LeBron was already one of the all-time greats. And I understand that there's always been a tension among Laker fans, in a lot of ways I think still exists, towards LeBron.
Sure.
And LeBron, I think to a lesser degree, Anthony Davis, but LeBron has always been seen in a lot of ways as an interloper with this organization, and a mercenary who kind of bigfooted his way in with AD and with Clutch. And there are positives and negatives that come with that. And to be perfectly honest, there was turbulence with this organization before LeBron arrived. I imagine there will be turbulence with this organization after LeBron leaves, because the central characters involved with a lot of the turbulence, many of them are still here. It's not a LeBron thing.
Well, I mean, like you said, there was plenty of turbulence when Kobe was there. It's not like that was smooth
absolutely
sailing.
Oh, and look, I mean, you and I covered the last 10 years of Kobe's career. We were there all the time. I think we both had a good relationship with Kobe, but Kobe was not easy to have in your organization. Like, he was, to be clear, absolutely worth every eggshell that was often walked upon, because the good with Kobe far, far outweighed the bad. But he's very strong, not just in his will, but just in his opinions and his vision and the way he wanted things done. And as much as that could sometimes create tension, at the same time, that specificity would often be very useful for the organization.
It's had, he didn't live. I mean, you and I were one of a few people who were like, when Kobe's gone, he's gone. He's not coming back. He's not going to decide he's going to need to unretire. He's got too much other stuff going on, and he's going to be too immersed in whatever he has set up to come after basketball, because first of all, he knew he couldn't play at the level he wanted to anymore. A year off would have had him feeling spry for a month and a half, and then everything would have fallen apart again. His body couldn't do it anymore, and he knew that better than anybody. But he was also way too interested in other stuff. And once he was done, he wasn't going back. And
incredibly smart. I mean, we've said this before. He's one of the most intellectually curious people we've ever been around.
Much not athletes, people.
Yeah.
And I think the organization needed his voice to help them find a new identity and tell them, it's, not everything has to be framed in the Mamba mentality, and, not every free agent acquisition has to be like all of these things. Like, they almost needed the permission from him to say, move on. Like, I'm God. I will be here when you need me. I'm a supporter of the Lakers. Always, always, always. I'll be here courtside. You need me to go help you sign a guy. I'm your ambassador, whatever it is. But move on. Like, it's okay. And that, I don't want to say it never really happened. Like,
and especially becomes harder when
he dies in that way.
Not just I was going to say that way, like prematurely and in such an awful way.
You and I have plenty of criticisms of the front office. This is not intended to be one. Like, Rob Pelinka and Kobe Bryant were like brothers to each other. Jeannie and Kobe, I don't know which familial relationship is the most appropriate here, but like, Kobe was family to Jeannie and the Bus family and all of these things. That matters. And so you feel rightly, and he was family to the city. Like, he was something very, and in death, you become something even more so. And there is an people, from fans to the inside the organization to players to everyone, feel an obligation always to live up to that standard and execute on that standard. And that part is okay, but it's the how. There's more than one way to do that. And there's more than, and like I said, him not being here to say, it's okay to do it differently. It's okay to go like, this guy doesn't have to be me. I know I will vouch for that guy. It doesn't look like the way I did it, but the way I did it was my way, and whatever it is. And just to sort of have that sort of steadying voice because I don't think he would have been a meddler. And I don't think he'd have been one of these guys who, sits on like the NBA, TNT crew talking about how terrible everything is. And I don't think that would have been him with the organization.
I don't think he would have been doing stuff that, frankly, Magic used to do before Magic eventually began running the organization. There were several years between, I would say maybe about 2014 till Magic got hired on officially, that he was very unhelpful with his public criticism of Jim Buss, that no matter how justified you might have thought it was in terms of accuracy, it was not helpful in the way it was public and in the way it fed the idea that the Lakers were a dysfunctional organization. These were all things Magic should have been saying behind closed doors, and Magic has just never been a behind closed doors kind of guy. He has always been somebody who says the things publicly they wanted to. And look,
in front of open doors.
Yep. And to be honest, it could have been helpful for Kobe to still be here if Jeannie ever wanted to part ways with Rob. I think honestly she would want the reassurance from Kobe, like, okay. It'll be okay between you and me. You and I are good. It'll be okay. But it goes without
saying. There's an element of firing Rob that is firing Kobe.
Yeah, and I can't say with certainty that is what prevents Jeannie from doing it. I don't think she wants to fire Rob in the first place.
She doesn't like firing people, which I understand too.
But I think it would be easier for her to do it if she heard from Kobe, you and I are going to be okay. Like, this has nothing to do with me, nor should it. But this was a long way of saying Kobe is still very missed within the organization, very missed within the city. The last thing I wanted to mention, just to make sure people heard the thought that I was raising with Rui, when it comes to the idea that you would trade Rui because of past playoff letdowns, or specifically the 2024 series against Denver, where Rui was frankly awful. If that's the thought process, then I would imagine a lot of Laker fans should at least be reminded that we heard from an awful lot of you that Vando, get rid of him because he's unplayable in the playoffs. Right. Remember what happened in every series as minutes started going down. Now, to be clear, I think that was more about the other guys not making shots than Vando truly being played off the floor. But nonetheless, if that holds for Rui, then the same logic should hold for Vando.
Role players, that's why I say role players, you got to be real careful, especially about saying that guy can't play in the playoffs, that guy can play in the playoffs. There are certain exceptions. Kike Hernandez, to use a baseball example. Mm-hmm. He just seems to become a completely different person.
Robert Horry,
just makes all the shots. Like, there are certain guys, but generally speaking, I agree with you. Got to be careful. Anyway, we'll be back after the game, as will Dave Pele with the postcast. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 27,000 subscribers. We will see everyone in just a few hours after what is hopefully another Lakers win. See everyone later.